أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رضي الله تعالى عنه وعن كافة المؤمنين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the evils of the jinn, the evils of wicked men, the evils of those that would wish hasad and envy upon us, the evils of the evil eye, of all of those things in the world of the ghaib that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given authority over us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from those things. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our iman, to make us sadiq, to keep us in a state of tahara, Ya Rabbil Alameen wa Ya Akram al-Akrameen. There was a man in Irish folk, Irish stories, ancient stories. The man's name was Jack. And Jack had gone out one night and gone out drinking. And he spent this entire night drinking, just excessive, lavish drinking. And then on his way home, as Jack is walking home, he reaches his house, his home, and sitting there waiting in front of him is the devil, Shaitan. And Shaitan says, "It's time for you to come with me. Guess where you're going?" So Jack, still drunk, has some of his faculties and manages to play a trick on Shaitan, according to the story, according to the Irish story. And manages to get Shaitan to climb this tree in front of his house. And so there's Jack and there's Satan or Shaitan at the top of the tree. It's part of the trick. And Jack takes out his knife and carves a cross into the tree, which, according to the story, prevents Shaitan from coming down, prevents Satan from coming down. The Irish are Catholic or Christians, therein is the symbol. So he carves this cross into the tree, and so now, according to the story, Satan can't come down because the cross is there. And so, the story goes, Satan makes a deal with Jack. He says, "Listen, you let me off of this tree, I've got a lot of other work to do. I'm sitting here is waste of my time. I've got other things to do. I can't be sitting up here. You let me down off this tree, and I will guarantee that you will never enter hell. You will never come into Jahannam," is the story. So Jack says, "I need you to promise. Swear." Satan swears. So Jack gets rid of the cross on the tree. Satan comes down and he goes according to his business. So Jack, thinking that he has secured safety from Jahannam, from the hellfire, goes on to live his life. And every single day of his life, he lives it in a completely sinful way. And is proud. So much so that every single day of his life, he's committed major sins every single day. And at the end of his life, he dies. And when his soul is taken, the angels leave him alone, according to the story. He says, well, why can I'm guaranteed not to go to hell. And the angels will say, well, yes, but you didn't do anything to get into heaven either. So you are destined to exist in a place between heaven and hell. You will never go to heaven, and you will never go to hell. But your soul will be suspended forever in this realm of darkness, cold. And so the story ends with the fact that one of the angels gives Jack a turnip. You know what a turnip is? It's a vegetable. A turnip. He says, eat on this. Eat this. And the devil, according to the story, takes a piece of coal from the hellfire, a piece of coal, it's burning, and he throws it at Jack. He says, here, you want a little light? Take that for your light. You'll exist in darkness. So Jack, having only the light, the piece of coal as his light, and having only the turnip as his sustenance, and the coal being so hot he can't touch it, he can't carry it around with him, and so he takes the turnip and smashes it into the coal, and the coal is inside the turnip, and now he's got what is essentially a lantern. And he walks around holding the turnip as a lantern in this realm which exists between heaven and hell. From this mythology, this myth, this story, this folk story, the idea goes from Ireland in Europe and transfers to America with the Irish immigrants. And the turnip is not really a fancy vegetable here in America. But because the Americas were about celebrated the fall season, and there's Thanksgiving and vegetables during this time, the pumpkin is popular. And so the practice of putting a light that the Irish had, of putting a light inside of a turnip, doesn't make sense to the Americans, the settlers. So instead they carve out the pumpkin and put candles in the pumpkin, and we get what's called the jack-o'-lantern. This is the pumpkin, the orange jack-o'-lantern, the pumpkin people put in front of their houses on Halloween. Light it up at night. The idea being, be careful when you deal with me in my home, because if you make the wrong mistake, you won't go to hell, you won't go to heaven. You'll exist in this liminal space between both. The story of Jack becomes the jack-o'-lantern, a symbol for that. I begin this khatira, this discussion about what's going on tonight, because so many times we see symbols of all kinds of things. And we take a holiday like Halloween that has all kinds of symbols around it, but we have no idea what these things are about. And as I mentioned Tuesday, the term Halloween is really a mispronunciation of the phrase a night to celebrate saints, basically, dead people. It is a night that was honored in the Catholic Church and reserved for celebration of saints and people that had died before. The word used to be All Hallows, or Hallows, meaning sanctity and holy, Eve. And in another narration of the etymology of the word, it used to be All Hallows, meaning holy, evening. But the Irish and the Scots didn't say evening. They would cut the word evening in English short, and they would say even. Like we say in English sometimes, good evening. Even. And the Scots would take the word even and abbreviate it. Instead of E-V-E-N, they would take the V out and they'd say een, to mean even. Actually, they would write it E''E''N. Apostrophe would symbolize the fact that the V was gone. So the word even, they would abbreviate in Scotland as een. Een would mean even. Even meant evening. So they would say All Hallows E'en, they would say. In Ireland, All Hallows Evening. The eve, or the evening, or the night, where the holy saints, right, in the Catholic Church are celebrated. And with this practice, this holiday of Halloween, there's multiple symbols, a lot of imagery that gives rise to different practices that on the surface sometimes we think they may be simple or innocent, but in reality what is behind them is very sinister and very evil. And so the first is this idea, as I mentioned in the story about Jack, of a completely perverted understanding of the structure of the afterlife. The second is that you have the holiday of Halloween is built. It is constructed on ideas and imagery that involve symbols of horror, symbols of hatred of Islam, and all kinds of evil symbols that, if we really understand it, there is no way we could condone participation in such a holiday or activity. One of the first two symbols for Halloween was Dracula, and the other one was Frankenstein. Both symbols that came out of Europe. The symbols after that involved the witch and the skeleton. And then from those four symbols, an entire mythology, an entire system of the practice of supporting and celebrating death, supporting and celebrating evil and magic, and what was called the occult, darkness, emerges. And Halloween becomes a holiday where darkness is celebrated, not light. It's very important to understand. Darkness is celebrated. Darkness is celebrated, and also death is celebrated, not life. That is the night to hail darkness and to hail death and to suppress light and to suppress life, or to alter life. And it is built on stories where life itself is altered and where death itself remains supreme and dominant. And built on stories where death overrides darkness and life. The classical example of Dracula, iconic figure, the oldest figure of Halloween, one of them to reach at least the Americas, was Dracula. A figure, a mythological figure that is built and constructed off of violence, hatred of Islam, killing and murder, and a love of the consumption of filth, of blood. We know the story of Vlad Dracula, who was captured by the Ottoman Sultan Murad II, the early 15th century. He and his brother were political prisoners, and instead of putting them in the dungeon, in the prison, the Sultan sees these two young boys, Vlad, who at this time is 13, sees potential in them and decides instead to educate them. We know they were educated in the Quran. We know they were educated in Arabic language, and we know they were educated in Turkish language, and we know they studied logic as well. We know that Vlad's brother, who was a little older than him, whose name was Radu, we know that he becomes Muslim, and instead of returning to his family, chooses to stay with the Ottomans, and becomes a great general, becomes learned in warfare, learned in martial arts, stays with the ulama, has a good relationship with his teacher, and becomes close friends with the prince, the son of the Sultan. After Sultan Murad would die, his son Sultan Mehmed would ascend to the throne when he was young. And Sultan Mehmed and the brother of Dracula, Radu, would become good friends. But Vlad would go off and do his own thing, leave the empire, develop his own kingdom in what is called today Romania. And he would refuse to support the Ottoman conquest. And when it was time to pay what was due to the Ottoman Sultan, not only did he refuse to pay, but he viciously murdered the emissaries, the messengers of the Sultan. So much did he hate Muslims that he, knowing the tradition, commanded the messengers to remove their imamah, to take off their turbans out of respect for his authority. And when they refused, he had them executed and nailed the turbans to their heads. He said, if you will not take them off for me, you will never take them off. He would kill 15,000 Muslim soldiers on his march and on his attacks and on his guerrilla-like warfare against the Ottoman armies and the Muslims. His preferred method of taking the lives of Muslims, particularly Muslim soldiers, although he was a specialist in killing Muslim babies, and he was quite professional at killing Muslim women. His preferred method was to take a stake, a wooden stake, and insert it into the bottom of the person and let it come out through the mouth, and to hang the stake up in the middle of the street. Thousands upon thousands of Muslims he murdered like this. It's called impalement. You take a 6-foot wooden pole that's sharp at the end, and you run it through the person. From the bottom, and it comes out, goes through the stomach and comes out through the mouth. The person is alive when this happens. And according to, we have records, according to Russian and German historians, you can find this on the internet. I'm not making this up. He would have lunch in the midst of this tragedy. He would have lunch and have steaks around him. And the Muslims would be dying, the blood would be dripping. The blood from their bodies would be dripping around him. And therein is part of the mythology about Dracula drinking blood. He witnessed the boiling of Muslim babies. And he would line up the father and the mother, and he would force the parents to eat some of the parts of their own children. And then he would impale the parents. We know that some of the generals from Sultan Mehmed who marched against Vlad, and eventually his brother Radu and his specialized force would kill him. But we know that some of the generals, when they encountered these things, they had to send back some of their troops because they got sickened from the sight. They couldn't stand it. He had to send back troops to Istanbul for therapy. And the Ottomans would later develop what we call today music therapy. Because of the peace that some of these soldiers found in their soul from what they witnessed of the horrors of Vlad Dracula's legacy disturbed them so much that they could not sleep and they could not go home to their families. They had a hard time looking at their children even. The Ottomans realized that through music you could calm the soul and the person could be rehabilitated. So it was very interesting that from this tragedy, musical therapy emerges in the Ottoman Empire. Vlad was paid by the ruling members of the Catholic Church to launch a crusade against the Muslims. And he's held up now in the country of Romania as an icon. And pop culture makes billions of dollars not only off the story of Dracula, but off of spin-offs of Dracula, vampire, all kinds of vampire movies and vampire paraphernalia and vampire costumes, etc. Then came the story of Frankenstein. A story about a man who wants the power of God, who wants to create. So he creates this human being from death. And he, through electricity, supposedly causes life. And then this creature, created from death, all of a sudden wants a wife. And commands his maker, in mimicking the story, the biblical story, commands his maker to create a wife for him, a woman for him. So he goes out, Dr. Victor Frankenstein goes out and takes the pieces of dead women and puts them together and supposedly brings this lady to life. What's the motto of General Electric, GE? We bring good things to life. Then he realizes what he did. Right? And why does this beast want a wife? Is because he sees his maker. Right? Victor Frankenstein has a wife. Victor Frankenstein's engaged. And he sees the love between them. So he wants a wife too. And so he tells him, make me a wife or I'll kill your wife. So he makes him a wife. But then he realizes how far will this go. Dr. Frankenstein realizes, if I make him a wife and now if I let her live, then they'll procreate and they'll produce babies that are dead. And then this will never end. And so to stop his madness, he kills her. The beast kills his wife. Dr. Frankenstein kills his creation. And then Dr. Frankenstein kills himself. This is the mythology stemming from European Christianity about this debate about Adam and Eve and about the destruction that human beings caused. And what if God had changed his mind? Said, wait a minute, maybe the angels were right. Maybe it would be too much bloodshed on the earth. I think I'll get rid of them now. Maybe it was a bad idea to create human beings. Maybe they would go too far. Let me get rid of them. So the doctrine and the story of Frankenstein is a commentary on the story of Adam and Eve, but with a perverted twist. But that becomes a bestseller. That becomes a cultural icon. Death and the revival, or what's called the resurrection, if you will. That becomes a symbol and a motif of this holiday as well. Witches came next. Magic, satanic magic, black magic, all kinds of magic. Very interesting, it was done by women. That's where the idea of the witch comes from. The costume of the witch, the iconic nature of the witch. The fact that not only is magic is bad, but the fact that a woman does it as well. And that the only way to get rid of them is to burn them. So fire, again, comes in to death and darkness. It's used as a torture and a torment. And we know from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that he said, it is forbidden for my ummah to torture or to kill with what? With fire. It is forbidden. Allah has forbidden me and my ummah to torture and to kill with fire. So these practices come in. In 1794, going into the 19th century, in the 1800s, in England, there was a practice where the poor, on the night of Halloween, used to go out. And the rich people used to bake little pies or little cakes. And they would call these cakes souls, like ruh, soul. And the poor people would go door to door, begging and asking for souls. This is in England. They called it souling, like soul and ing, souling. The thing was, they'd knock on the door and they'd make a threat, or they'd make an offer. They'd say, we know that you have deceased relatives. Maybe your mother's died, your father's died, a friend of yours has died. We know that there's someone who's died in your family. We will say a prayer for them right now. But we'd like some food. We'd like this soul in return. They called the cake a soul. They'd like the soul in return. In other words, you give us the soul, right? We'll give you a dua, essentially. A dua for the maid, for the deceased. They called it souling. And so people on Halloween used to prepare these little sweets, these little cakes. They were bigger than the palm of the hand, like little pies. And when someone would knock at the door, they know here is your soul. My mother has died, can you please pray for her? And the people, they would take the cake and they would say a prayer immediately. They would go on to the next house. If the person did not have a soul to offer, then the soulers, as they were called, would threaten them. They would say, if you do not give us something of value, we will make a bad dua, an evil dua for the soul of your loved one. And we will mark it by damaging your house in some way, or doing something bad to you. And so to protect themselves or to protect their loved ones, they would find something or anything and offer it. And when this practice finally came to the United States of America in 1908, 1909, it took on a different name. It became known as trick or treating. The word souling didn't catch on so well. It started in the Irish and the Catholic communities up north, and then it sort of made its way down. Souling, or trick or treating, combined with the jack-o'-lantern and the stories and the mythologies of fear and horror, Dracula, Frankenstein, witches, all of these things developed with the Irish pagan belief that the night of the 31st is a night where you celebrate the dead. And it was a new holiday to come to the Americas, so the Americans had a tough time, those that were not Irish, had a tough time saying All Hallows Eve. So they just called it, the all dropped off and Halloween stayed as a name. It became a national sort of holiday in the 70s. And later on there was a market, there was a brand that came onto it. The marketing of fear, the branding of horror, the commodification of blood, of gore, putting a dollar bill on death. You see, when death becomes marketable, when you can make money off of it, when you can make billions off of convincing kids and families that it's in their best interest to spread fear, and to have fun, mind you, spreading fear. Right? And any other than Halloween, if any parent's child comes home with blood on them, they'd freak out. Halloween is the only night where parents themselves and kids enjoy the practice of disfiguring themselves and altering themselves and making them look like they would never wish to look if that were real. They spend money to alter themselves in a way that is not superior or better, but to alter themselves in a way that lowers them. ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ السَّافِلِينَ. We reduce them to the lowest of the low. There are some Muslims that think it's innocent. You see some Muslims, for example, dressing up their kids and, taking pictures and putting it on Facebook and dressing up and going out and, Muslim groups going trick-or-treating and all of these things is absolutely deplorable. Absolutely horrifying. Because what is behind this is that we are teaching ourselves and our kids to honor souls that have not been located, that have not gone to a particular place. We put money into the marketing of a symbol that is a symbol of hatred against Islam. We spend our time and our energy in supporting the practice of celebrating darkness, celebrating death, celebrating magic, celebrating belief in things that involve shirk or kufr, or at the very least, kaba'ir, major sins. And most of all, we take somebody else's invention. Because this idea, this practice came from the Catholic Church and from Irish pagan beliefs as well, and European ideas. We take someone else's belief, someone else's story, someone else's teaching, someone else's fabrication, someone else's errors, and we adopt them as our own. And we pay for it. buy costumes. We buy candy to give. So we pay into someone else's education, and we have our kids exposed to that right there. We have a different teacher. We don't need Europe's education. We have a different educator. We don't need pagan education. If you want fear, because fear, some people are fascinated by horror and by fear, despite the fact that the Prophet ﷺ spoke against scaring people. That scaring a believer or even a disbeliever, scaring anyone is an act of shaitan. It's an act of the jinn. And this is why we recited Surah Al-Falaq tonight and Surah Al-Nas, to seek refuge from the evilness of human beings and jinn and magic and all of those things, because there is an element of reality to that. But we have a remedy as well. But if you want a little fear, I always tell people, if you want a little horror, read the Quran. لَآكِلُونَ مِن شَجَرٍ مِّن زَقُّومٍ فَمَالِئُونَ مِنْهَا الْبُطُونَ. They will eat from the tree of Zaqqum, this bitter tree in the hellfire, whose fruit is the most scariest fruit and the most frightening thing they will see. It's from a Sahih Hadith. The fruit of Zaqqum will be frightening to the disbelievers. It will cause them fear. فَمَالِئُونَ مِنْهَا الْبُطُونَ. But they will have no choice. They'll have to eat it. You like fear so much? Go to it. You want to pay and be a part of an industry of fear? Then consume it. Consume it. فَشَارِبُونَ عَلَيْهِ مِنَ الْحَمِيمِ. They will drink what? Hamim. This boiling liquid from this tree. Remember, the least punishment on the Day of Judgment, from the words of the Prophet ﷺ, the least punishment, the least painful torment, is that the last person to enter Jahannam will get the smallest, weakest, least torment. That person will have shoes made from the hellfire, custom made from Jahannam. You don't have to worry about the size, it will fit. And it will be so hot, those shoes, it will boil the brain of the person. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Hafazana Allah ta'ala minna. May Allah protect us. It will be so hot, the brain of the person will boil. That's the torment. The least torment. Try these shoes on. You walked around the earth thinking you were special? Walk in these. So they will drink hamim, liquid, boiling liquid, that will be hotter than that. فَشَارِبُونَ شُرْبَ الْهِيمِ. And they will drink it, that boiling, scalding, hot water that burns and completely annihilates their insides. They will drink it the way that dehydrated camels drink. I was watching, there's a story on National Geographic about camels. It said a thirsty camel can drink 30 gallons of water in 13 minutes. A thirsty camel can drink 30 gallons of water, like a gallon of milk, 30. Take it down. That's a thirsty camel. You give me a liter of bottled water, I'm good on a thirsty day. Allah Ta'ala says they will go back like a dehydrated camel, just lapping and taking it in. هَذَا نُزُلُهُمْ يَوْمَ الدِّينِ. That's their welcome on the Day of Judgment. You indulged in a culture of fitna, you like causing problems, you like fear, you like everybody else's holiday, you followed the path of the pagans in this group and that group. This is how you're welcomed. You welcomed everybody else's holiday, everybody else's culture, everybody else's tradition, everybody else's shirk, everybody else's blood, everybody else's ideas, everybody else's ideology. Well, here's your welcome. There's enough in our Quran to be afraid of. And so teach your children fear, yes. But don't teach them, let us not teach our kids what Halloween teaches our kids. Halloween teaches our kids, and I'll close here, to fear what is other than Allah. That is the point. Our task is to teach ourselves and our kids to fear Allah. If you fear anything in this life, you run away from it. But when you fear Allah, you run to Him. In Halloween, people teach you to run to fear, to run to the store, buy the costume, buy the candy. Run to your fears. Watch horror movies all night. Embrace your fears. Embrace all of these things. Don't think about Allah. Put death in your mind, so that death itself is celebrated, not Rabb of death, not Khaliq of death. This is the point. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in fear of Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in love of Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in worship of Him. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our a'mal in this life and in the next. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ وَتُبْ عَلَيْنَا يَا مَوْلَانَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ وَالْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Are there any questions? Inshallah ta'ala. Please.
I want to have some pop quiz for the kids.
And pop quiz. Tamam.
Hafiz Umar.
Okay.
What lesson do you have?
Let's put it like this. Question number 1. What are you afraid of? He said Allah.
Inshallah, all the senior citizens who are lying against the wall, come closer, inshallah. All the senior citizens, come forward, so we can hear you better.
Question number 2. All right, Allah will do. Very good. Question number 2. Why is it? Why do Muslims not celebrate Halloween?
I'll answer it.
Yes.
The answer to the question is because like you were saying, Halloween demonstrates hatred against the religion.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why we as Muslims do not celebrate it.
Okay, that's very good. One answer. Very good. Give me another answer. Good. Why do we not celebrate Halloween? Yes, Farouk. No, it's cool to be Dracula, man. It's cool.
I got on that.
You know, he's a rich guy, he flies like a bat. It's just fun. Nobody thinks about history. We're having fun.
I got a different answer. It has to do with
Hold on. Let me go. I'll come back to you. Yes. How is it shirk? Nobody's bowing down. We're getting candy. We're having fun. Think. Your answers are correct. I want you to go deeper. Yes. Celebrating death but not life. Very good. How? How in the world are we celebrating? How in the world is this holiday? Celebrate death. I'm just taking candy from my friend. That's not death. That's M&M's. Huh? What's wrong with candy? It's so simple. What's wrong with putting on funny clothes? If I may not dress up like Dracula, what if I dress up like a clown? What if I dress up like Superman? Superman helped people. He didn't kill anybody. How do you deal with these arguments? Yes, Farouk. Okay, very good. So it's part of participation. Very good. So dressing up in Halloween is participation. Okay. Taking candy is, what about giving candy? Can you buy candy and have it available for trick-or-treaters that come to your house? By the way, the Prophet ﷺ, he used to give gifts. Right? Tahabu. Give gifts, people will love you. We live in a time where people don't like Muslims, so we should participate in every holiday that has us give gifts. We don't have to dress up. Let's just give candy all night. Is giving candy participating? What do you think about that?
I think yes.
You think it is?
I think it's a yes.
What if I give candy the day after Halloween? So you're encouraging their participation in Halloween. Okay. What if I give gifts on Halloween with the intention to bring them to Islam? Is it really? Yes. Okay. They think what now? So it's still connected to the old practice of Europe and solely. Okay?
Yeah.
What about if all I do is go buy my family, mom and dad, I tell them, look, I just want a costume. I'm not going to go trick-or-treating. I'm not going to give out candy. I just want to dress up at home and take a picture. Okay, very good. Well, what about this one? Now, I heard some person told me, I hear a lot of things, Muslims talk about a lot of stuff. I heard there was this holiday called Ashura, the 10th of Muharram, and I heard that the Jews used to celebrate that day, and then the Prophet ﷺ, he thought it was a good idea, and he celebrated it. So what if we think it's a good idea to celebrate Halloween? Can we do the same thing? I mean, the Prophet did it, right? I mean, the Prophet took a holiday from the Jews. Can we take a holiday from the Christians? I mean, the Jews are people of the book. Christians are people of the book. If we can take one holiday from the Jews, why can't we take a holiday from the Christians? Well, it seems logical. What do you think about that, Hamza? What do you say? You'd say no. Why?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was it that the Jews were celebrating? Hamza. So they weren't celebrating death, right? What were they celebrating? Therein is a big difference. More importantly, who they were celebrating life given to them by who? Because who saved them? So in reality, was it a celebration of life? Is Ashura about celebrating life in reality? Or is it about something more deeper? Is it about thanking the giver of life and praising the creator of life? Is that what that's about? I'm asking you. You say yes. We have one yes. Only one yes in this room from the youth. We have two yes. I need some, three yes. I have four. I can get another four for $500. Can I get a five? Five. I get a five. I have a six. Six for seven. 8, 9. There we go. So, how do you compare the Muslims honoring Ashura, the 10th of Muharram, and Muslims trying to practice in any way other holidays? How do you compare that and contrast that? How do you combine the two or not combine the two? What would you say? Ashura is okay because of this. Halloween's not okay because of that. How would you put that in your own narrative, your own words?
I would say because Ashura is like Ashura is okay because it was basically thanking Allah.
Excellent.
What Allah's given us.
Bravo.
Says, right?
So Halloween, can we thank Allah?
Halloween, no, because Halloween is the thing that when it comes to Halloween is that Halloween is kind of shirk in a way. It's kind of going.
I love the way you said shirk in a way.
Because like Tawheed,
yes.
It's going against Allah's orders.
Is there anything tawheedi about Halloween? Anything?
I think there is.
There is, okay. What is it?
You know what it is?
What
it
is
is that it is basically that in Halloween, because like Islam teaches also they have to be warm, compassionate, and full of mercy, right? But what's Tawheed now is that Halloween, what we learn is the opposite. We learn to be wholehearted, we learn to be mean, and that kind of stuff.
So هكذا that's your dars for tonight. خلاص, I agree. Very good. ربنا تقبل منا. May Allah accept our efforts at understanding and trying to draw nearer to Him, inshallah ta'ala. Ameen. May Allah bless you, reward you, and keep you strong on His path. May He bless you with complete practice as much as you can of the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair, inshallah. We have a special treat, inshallah, for all the children, inshallah. Back in the back, there is a pizza, inshallah. Eat with Bismillah and eat with Alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum.